He's Henry Gomez, an advertising agency strategist with over 25 years of experience.
And he's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief. And together we're the Brief Brothers, having an ongoing conversation about creative briefs, briefing, and advertising. Well, Howard, another episode, and today we wanted to talk a little bit about the time that it takes to write a creative brief and finding the time, and do brief writers and strategists have enough time to think about and write their creative brief? So tell me a little bit about your thoughts on it, and then I'll give you some of mine.
I bring a slightly different perspective to this, as you know, Henry, because when I do creative brief writing workshops, I'm working almost exclusively with marketers and brand experts who either have an in-house creative department, sometimes an in-house ad agency, but they also have, external agencies. But they're doing their own work. They want to learn how to write a great creative brief. But unlike you, creative brief writing is just one of many things that they do. And they're trying to juggle multiple tasks with the huge task of writing a creative brief, and they struggle with it. So I talk a lot about collaboration in the sense of working with other team members to do this as a group effort, a small group effort, so they can divide tasks rather than having the sense of everything is on my shoulders. But they tell me over and over and over again that they get not as much time as they would like to write a brief, and therefore they don't have a chance to really think about it. So when we do exercises in my workshop where we collaborate, we take a chance, we have an opportunity to have small groups bat around ideas, listen to a first take on how they would fill out one particular part of the brief. And then someone says, well, what about this and what about that? The comeback to that is it's so much easier than when I work with a partner to do it. So we have to come strategize different ways to build in the time for people who have multiple tasks to beyond writing a creative brief. So it's slightly different from your perspective. Your job as a strategist gives you a more singular focus on that. Why don't you expand on your thoughts on some of the things that you do to make sure you have enough time?
Yeah, so riffing off what you said, though, I think if I were you, I would advise clients that claim to have an in-house agency that they should have an in-house strategist in that agency if they truly believe they have an in-house agency. And the reason I say that is because my role as a strategist at an agency, probably the most important thing I do is write creative briefs. But it's not the only thing I do, but a lot of what I do is kind of oriented around the moment that I'm going to write the creative brief. I often have to write POVs. I have to help sell the creative. I have to conduct research. All that stuff kind of falls under my role as a strategist, but it all has kind of one eye on developing the creative brief. So having enough time, and I think that is the reason why strategy spun off as its own department within ad agencies, because it's not just about time, and time is important. It's about mental bandwidth. If you're an account person that is also tasked with writing a creative brief, well, you have a lot of daily tasks like writing meeting reports and setting meetings with clients and negotiating scopes of work and all kinds of things, entertaining clients that have nothing to do with strategy or writing a brief. And it really takes away from your ability to think at the 20,000 foot level, which is where a strategist needs to be. And so you end up with myopia. You only see the client's world. You only see it that way. And that's exactly the opposite of the benefit of having a strategist, which is somebody that can look at it objectively, not only understand the client's business, but also understand consumers and be out there in the world, experiencing the world. So I typically, and this might be something you could recommend, is particularly when you're approaching time to write a creative brief, they should use that little calendar function to block off focus time so that they can go out to the supermarket or go to the car dealership or whatever it is and kind of do that organic thinking about the brand and the product and the problem at a 20,000-foot view rather than just sitting at a desk and trying to write a brief, cold turkey. I don't think that that's a very effective mechanism. And speaking of that, I think one of the things that we both agree on is what we see in not just brief writers, but practitioners in general in advertising and marketing is looking at advertising, looking at it with the eyes of a practitioner, not the eyes of a consumer. Consumers want to skip the ad, don't pay attention. Like every ad that comes on, you should be like paying attention to say, have I seen this one before? What is it for? What are they trying to tell me? What's the strategy here? I mentioned an anecdote, like my dad's a cosmetic surgeon. I couldn't imagine him going to the beach and not in his mind commenting on the bad work or the good work that some of these people have had on their bodies. So we need to kind of adopt that philosophy and really look at every ad we come across as an opportunity to better ourselves as practitioners.
I agree. And creatives do this a lot. We are the only species on the planet that I know of who will buy a magazine that's full of nothing but ads, right? And we study those ads, and we do this with physical magazines, but we also go online, we watch TV spots, we look at websites, we study what's being done, not only in our category, but other categories, just to see what are the creative ideas that are being attempted, that are winning awards, that are actually being effective. And when I ask that question of marketers or account people, I often get deer in the headlights looks because they don't know anything about even their own category, much less outside their category. And yet they will sit in judgment of the work that the creative department presents. And that affects how they would sit down and write a brief. They need to know context. And you described it as myopia. I would also describe it as living in a vacuum. Yeah. They don't have any exposure to what's out there. So time, building in time to do it, but also study our industry. We are tremendously guilty of not knowing our own history. And it's sometimes it's embarrassing.
And bandwidth, pull your head out of the sand and look around at the world and see where your brand and your product fits in the context of the world, not just in the little industry or where it plays.
A small anecdote here. I did a workshop for a technology company that I happened to have done the creative on 15 years earlier. I was a freelance creative at an agency here in LA. And I brought that up. I said, I did work on your account. And it was called the blah, blah, blah campaign. I don't want to give it away. And they looked at me like they had just landed on Mars. They'd never even heard of it. So no one there had been there for more than 5 years. But the worst, they made no attempt, or at least they said they made no attempt to learn about the history of their own brand's advertising. So they'd never heard about the campaign that I'd worked on.
So here's an idea that I came up with, and I would love to see somebody do this, but I haven't seen it yet. But I think that there should be a position within client companies and marketers, brands, called the brand historian. And that brand historian would be more than just a historian like archiving old ads. It would be a trained marketer who would also archive the strategies and be able to explain to people how the brand was born, where the brand has been as a brand, creatively, what has been tried and what has worked and what has not worked, so that then the people that are working there today aren't reinventing the wheel every time they come up with a campaign. It probably pay this person 100, 120 grand, and you probably would save yourself millions of dollars of, doing really bad advertising or reinventing the wheel over several years.
I heartily endorse that idea. Good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
All right, we'll talk again. Okay, Henry, we're back and we're going to do our creative review right now. And I just wanted to let everybody know that I changed my shirt, and so did you, because, the first part of our show was so taxing we had to change costumes. So,
magic of television.
Isn't that wonderful? A couple episodes ago, we talked about in our creative review a Terminex spot, which was also done by the Martin Agency. And we were talking about their history of doing work for Geico. So today we're going to take a look at a fairly new spot for Geico, also by the Martin Agency. Let's take a look.
say you... Carl, what have you done?
Think anyone will notice?
Yes. Yeah.
If you ride, you get it.
Okay, we're back. Henry, what are your thoughts?
You know, I wanted to show this spot because a lot of times we focus on creative that's like the stuff that's in communication arts or the stuff that's, you know, splashed on Ad Age. But there's a lot of hardworking advertising out there that might not be sexy. And I think that the Martin Agency has really cornered the market on like kind of hardworking advertising that sells. I mean, their story with Geico is an incredible one, and it's not for the scope of today's discussion, but they basically, you know, changed the model of car insurance sales and also, you know, made Geico the #1 auto insurer in the country with an advertising approach, which I love. So obviously Geico spends a lot of money. They have different campaigns running at the same time with different characters, many recurring characters. And so this particular execution is for motorcycle insurance. And it's funny. It's not fall down on the floor hysterically laughing funny, but it is humorous. It's kind of the brand of humor that Geico uses, which is a wink and a smile and a chuckle. It's not offensive to anybody's senses, right? Like you look at it and the minute you realize it's a Geico commercial, you want to know what the punchline is, whether that punchline lives up or not. It's kind of irrelevant. It's you're going to kind of watch it to the end. And so I think it's a really good execution of the formula that Geico has. It's humorous. It's light humor. They get their message in this particular case for motorcycle insurance, and the you know, if you ride, you know, message. The other interesting thing to me about it, and I think we saw this in a lot of the Super Bowl work that we reviewed for our Super Bowl special, was music, right? Using licensed music, real music from real artists, famous songs that people of a certain age will appreciate, right? In this case, Fill Me Up Buttercup, Don't Break My Heart. I don't even know who the artist is, but a very catchy tune. It's been used in movies, been used in TV shows. So people of a certain age have nostalgia for it. And so I see a lot of things working in favor of this ad. Is it going to win a Cannes Lion? No. But it definitely gets noticed. It's got humor. The other weird thing I noticed was that the greenskeeper's name is Carl. And I immediately went to Carl Spackler from Caddyshack, the Bill Murray character, who's a greenskeeper on a golf course. And I wonder if that was some sort of subliminal. They named the greenskeeper Carl because, again, people of a certain age who idolize that movie the way I do, not the way you don't, but that would appreciate it. So that's my take on it.
I think what we might say is that you have damned it by faint praise. I think this would have worked much better as a 15, quite frankly. This kind of dragged for me. Now, I have to give all kinds of credit to the Martin Agency. They have created an iconic campaign. But like all iconic campaigns, and I'm thinking about Absolute and Bob for Nissan and the Energizer Bunny, all good things must come to an end. And maybe it's time to wrap this one up because this one, not only did it drag, it was a stretch. It just to me to be a stretch. If Carl's boss took that long to notice what Carl had been doing, now maybe I'm overthinking it, but I think the fact that I'm thinking about this tells you that the spot was not working. You know, it forced me to say, if I had enough time to stop and say, you took that long to notice that Carl was a little bit off the center line, maybe I'm not paying attention to the spot anymore, and this should have been a 6-second spot. So I'm going to give this a meh, thumbs sideways.
I think you are overthinking the boss's reaction, but I will agree with you that this spot in a shorter format definitely would work better than a longer format. And we may have mentioned this before. I think creatives are enamored with longer units, particularly 60s. And sometimes the story is really simple. I've had work that I love in my career, my background, that, you know, the agency put the 60 on their website. On my website, I put the 30 up because I thought the 30 told the story better than the 60 because the premise was so simple. It didn't need to drag on so much. So I'll agree with you there. I'll also throw in terms of to give Geico and the Martin Agency some props. I'll throw you a curveball and say, you know, while we were preparing for this creative review, we watched a spot featuring Dikembe Mutombo, the former NBA center, where he was blocking people's shots of different items. And maybe we'll play that one right here.
You're right. That's a fifth floor problem.
Not in my house. No. Not today.
Jimmy, how happy are folks who save hundreds of dollars switching to Geico?
Happier than Dikembe Mutombo blocking a shot.
Nice.
Get happy. Get Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
And I thought we were both laughing at it. It was very funny. And even you didn't know who Dikembe Mutombo was, but you thought it was funny. Right. I did know who Dikembe Mutombo was, and that his famous, you know, finger wag, "You're not going to get by me," was kind of like his trademark. So I think that one works on the level that, A, it didn't drag on. It had different scenarios. Each one was a plausible scenario, and where Dikembe Mutombo comes out and swats away.
Okay, Henry, I'm going to stop you here because you're like pivoting to another topic here. The reason that I was overthinking it was because I had time to think about it, and I don't think that's the point of an ad. Right. So if I can start thinking about things that I'm not supposed to be thinking about, what does that say? As a teacher of writing, I often give my students an exercise and they'll write 2 pages on something. And then I'll say, cut it in half, but don't lose the intent or the meaning. That becomes hard. And that's what you were talking about. Creatives like to have the long form, but can they say the same thing in half the amount of time? If they can't, there's a problem. And this, to me, should have been a 15, maybe even a 6.
Agreed. I will agree on that one.
Okay, thanks.
I only mentioned the other spot because the Brief Brothers taketh away, but they also give.
Okay, thanks, Henry.
Thank you, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
And he's Howard Eibach, and together we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.